Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in once again to the Duval Dive. Of course, I'm Kyle Nash, student of the game, a Fans First Sports Network. This is, of course, powered by Believe, and we're glad to be aboard. Travis D. Holmes, my personal champion, here with me, Big Cat Country. And I know that Christmas in July is a thing, but Travis, it's June. You're going to get that Christmas in July even a month early. How spoiled are you, sir? That's right. This is a safety-centric episode. Of course, we'll get into why here in just a moment. Oh, that's a work on your evil laugh, Travis. That'd be perfect with that look.
Let's go.
Damn, work on what? He's already got it. But you know what? With it, so people understand the premise, what it is we're trying to do. And this is a tier episode, so be warned. There will be controversial opinions, according to somebody out there somewhere. Hopefully you're out there in the comments as well. Duval Dive YouTube channel. That being said, Travis, go ahead and flash up on the screen. Once again, you guys coming in big from the Duval Devout. You Duval divers out there swimming fast. See, this is a legit question, which I always get worried, Travis D. Holmes, when I see the preamble of this is a legit question, by the way. But anyways, Brian goes on to say, I believe this is in the Discord, correct, Travis?
No, but Brian Evans on Facebook actually.
Facebook. Okay, there you go.
One of my guys on Facebook. He's just like in the middle of a conversation. Hey, do y'all think we have the worst safety position group in the league collectively? I thought that was a really interesting question. Yeah, and I was like, hey, you know what? We're going to talk about this on the podcast. I think that's a reasonable question to ask if you're just talking player to player and they haven't played it down in football yet, and you're just looking at this guys versus guys. So let's talk about it, man.
Well, and in order to really get there, the question as it's asked to collectively, how good is the safety core? I think we are wise to break down the rest of the league and see where they actually stand, right? The question was, do the Jacksonville Jaguars have the worst core? Right. I thought that was a little alarmist, but what do I know? I'm not a card-carrying member of the Duuval out here. All I can tell you is with you Travis Hunters, wow. But anyways, this isn't a Travis Hunter episode.
So is it an alarmist take? Possibly. But is it an appropriate question to ask? I would say yes. Just based on the fact that in the 2024 season, the Jacksonville Jaguars fan base and media alike all had questions on the Jacksonville Jaguars defensive line, all had questions on the offensive line, all had questions on the secondary, etc. And a lot of those things did come to pass in that season. So if folks want to stake their flag or to just to say objectively, hey, at this moment I have issues going into the season, so they can look back on it at a future date and say, hey, I told you then we thought this is going to be, an issue, this position group, that position group. Fine, let's have the conversation. So to your point, Nash, to have a real conversation around the whether or not this is a bad position group or a good position group, we have to look at the rest of the league. So let's look at the rest of the league. This is going to be a tier episode, but some of these things are going to have biases and opinions kind of wrapped in it. There's no way to make this objective as far as where a team lies, but hopefully, fingers crossed, we can come to a general agreement. You, the Duval Devout, me, Travis D. Holmes of Big Cat Country, Kyle, the student of the game, Fans First Sports Network, can all come to a general consensus and say whether or not you believe this team is has the best safety duo in the league, or they're top 10. Yeah, or not. Do your own podcast. Let us know in the comments if you disagree with where I have someone ranked, and we can talk about it. But this is either via Pro Football Focus, our guys over at Our Last help us with the depth charts, in addition to ESPN and SIS. So between all of those different combinations, this is kind of where I land. This is not an individual ranking. This is just more, hey, I'm putting these guys in this bucket, in this tier of where I would have them listed. So you got the Denver Broncos with Brandon Jones and Talana and Hufanga as a top 5 group of safeties. You got Detroit Lions. I actually think they might have the best safety group in Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch, personally.
That is a good pairing,
It's so dang good, man. And I know many in Jacksonville wanted Brian Branch when he was drafted, and they're just kicking With that not taking place, goodness. Yeah,
By
and
the way,
also make top five
if
with the
you're listening
Baltimore
to the
Ravens.
podcast, when he said that, I'm not a member of the Duval but I wanted them to draft Brian Branch.
Yeah, man, that's a rough one. But yeah, Baltimore Ravens also make that top five, in addition to the Seattle Seahawks with Kobe Bryant and Julian Love. And wrapping up my personal top five is the Arizona Cardinals with Buda Baker and Jalen Thompson. Just wanted to note for the audio listeners, the Seattle Seahawks, that Seattle Seahawks roster also has Nick Imamori, who they added to that secondary, and that does play into my consideration of making sure they're a top five unit. They were already pretty dang dominant already, but if you add a guy like that, and if he's able to kind of raise that group anyways, I kind of have him as a top five group. So I got the Denver Broncos, Detroit Lions, Baltimore Ravens, Seattle Seahawks, and Arizona Cardinals as all the top five safety duos in the league so far. And I wanted to just kind of update that with the tiers, because we know folks love tiers, man. So
Yes.
let's do it. Baltimore Ravens, come on down, man.
There's not
Denver
a lot of shock
Broncos.
here as you put these out here. You put the Broncos out there. That one kind of surprised me. I personally, listen, my favorite, I don't know if you think they're the best or not, but I can tell you my favorite is the Baltimore Ravens. I liked it when Kyle Hamilton even got drafted. I thought he was great as a rookie. Obviously not perfect, but still pretty good. And he's grown into, no one's going to be Ed Reed, anymore. As you set up the top tiers here and on the tier list. And by the way, if you're listening on the pod, make sure you go check out what Travis D. Holmes is doing on the tiers here on the Duval Dive YouTube channel, because you'll see what he's working on there too. But the point you make about the Seahawks being a more complete group, having a guy in there to argue to be another starter, it just only augments what they're doing. I might argue that safety is the best position that the Seattle Seahawks will boast right now on their core. But I don't know. And that Cardinals defense was competitive in a lot of places that you wouldn't expect. Buda Baker, obviously a big part of that. So I see where you're going with your top five. I get that.
That's it. So, and now we're going to hop into that top 10, because again, I know this is a Jaguar-centric podcast, and I want to get to the meat and potatoes of talking about where the Jacksonville Jaguars lie and where they land. But again, to get there, if we want to compare them to the league, we have to talk about the rest of the league. So stay with me. We got the rest of that top 10. We got the Pittsburgh Steelers, who I honestly thought arguably should have been in that top five, but we got to make a cut somewhere with Mina Fitzpatrick and Deshaun Elliott.
We'll get to that in a bit later.
It was just one of those. It was one of those tight splits. And again, this is ranking whether or not I have them at 6th in the league or as 10th in the league. This is just the bucket of individuals. The bucket of teams. So we got Gardner. We got the Tennessee. That's the Tennessee. Goodness gracious, the Houston Texans. I almost said something real wild. As another top 10 unit, and I'm just going to be real about this. I know Jacksonville Jaguars. I know Duuuval. I know you guys don't like the Houston Texans. You don't want to say anything positive about them. Their mama stink. Everybody hate them. Like, I got it. But no, that safety group is dope, man. Like, it just is. I'm just going to be honest about this. They got CJ Gardner.
That's what's up.
Yeah. Mama stink. I don't like the kids. They all ugly. I don't like all of it. Like, I got it. But no, they got CJ Gardner Johnson, Jimmy Ward. Kalen Bullock, who's freaking so underrated. Like, no folks outside of Houston just don't talk about him. Like Jalen Reed and Jalen Petrie. Like Petrie had his injury where I believe only played like 14 games last year. Jimmy Ward only played 10 games, so they end up bolstering that secondary, that safety group. And they're a team that consistently plays 3 safeties religiously in packages. Jaguars obviously added Eric Murray to our secondary, so maybe we'll do something similar, playing 3 safeties. You never know. We'll get to that when we talk about Jacksonville.
One can only hope. Yeah. Notice that the Jags are not in the top 10 yet as we're walking through this, but continue.
Yeah, but we'll talk about that. Maybe they can. We'll see where they land. Like, we don't know. But again, we wanted to comparatively just look at what we're talking about when we say what top 10 and top 5 teams look like, and then compare what you think the Jacksonville Jaguars secondary or safety group is going to look like to that. If you think they're a top 10 group, then cool. I trust your opinion, man. Hey, let's party. Let's have fun. But if
Scream
you
in the
don't,
comments, hit us on the socials. That's what it is.
but if you don't, well, then that's not me saying it. You saying it. That's fine. Yeah, we got the LA Rams with Cam Kitchens and Cam Curl, the Cam brothers, also a top 10 unit. And I just think they're awesome because they're both moderately young.
Right.
And we'll circle back to exactly why I think that's just an incredible unit because James Gladstone obviously has something to do with that. That seems
Ooh,
pretty good.
interesting.
Pretty good callback. Maybe we'll talk about that later. And then you got the Atlanta Falcons with Jesse Bates. I mean, just incredible Jesse Bates, Jordan Fuller, and they added Xavier Watts, who everyone in Duval County wanted to add at safety because he's super rangy. And wrapping that bad boy up with the Chargers with Derwin James and Eloy Gilman. And they also added R.J. Mickens in the draft. So that's my top 10. You're shaking your head. What's up?
No, I'm nodding with a lot of things there too. And as you update the tiers here, first of all, Derwin James has been a beast since he got into the league. And if I remember correctly, he was competing with Minkah Fitzpatrick for a Defensive Rookie of the Year award. You know, the year that they got, and I think I know why Derwin James beat him out. But you know what Minkah Fitzpatrick was doing as a NFL freshman for the Miami Dolphins at the time was absolutely insane. Mostly because the Dolphins didn't use him correctly, you know. And listen, as much as they mama is stank, I love me some CJ Gardner-Johnson. I get it. I understand. I might have snuck the Steelers in ahead of the Cards, but I think I see there's a common element in several of the teams that you have in your top 10, bottom 5 of the top 10 tier here. And that's they're reliant really on a good front. They do their job, and it's kind of hard to distinguish if the front is the issue, except for the Cardinals. They're the ones doing all the hard work because they haven't had a defensive front of any threat since, I don't know, Vic Beasley played there the Super Bowl year. Okay. So that's a fascinating thing.
And that's that's that marriage between the front and the secondary that's always taking place. That's just hard to kind of tell how good these guys are unless you are the Atlanta Falcons, because then their front almost never exists and they just somehow keep spitting out these great defensive secondaries. So that's like one of the few teams.
Yeah.
Right. That's one of the few teams that is just like, oh yeah, you know that secondary is good because they somehow still are always good and they have like no pass rush religiously. So
for those people out there who follow my coverage of UCF with the Black and Gold Banneret and Night Shift podcast, the reason why Richie Grant isn't getting a lot of time is because those dudes are ahead of him on the depth chart. That's why.
Okay. So as we continue pushing this thing along, and again, I want to be very clear in telling folks, hey, whether or not a team is 11th in the league or 14th in the league, they're still in that same bucket. So this is not a ranking. This is just me saying, hey, this is the bucket of teams I put these guys in. We got the Green Bay Packers as a better than average unit. When I say better than average, I'm just saying they're top half of the league. Pretty convincingly with Xavier McKinney and Evan Williams. If this was last year entering the season, I probably would have had those guys in the top 10. But they just had a little bit down in the second half of the season in 2024. So I kind of put them, they're still top half of the league. They're still better than average. They're just not the top part. You got Harrison Smith and Joshua Metellus for the Minnesota Vikings. As Harrison Smith gets a little bit older, but he's still solid. He's still, the man's like 36. Like, he's a solid NFL vet and he's still making plays, but he's just getting up there. You know what time this is. Tyron, go ahead.
Tyrann Mathieu. No, go ahead.
No, yeah. Tyrann Mathieu and Justin Reed for the Saints. Like, that's a dominant freaking duo. And then you add Jonas Sanker, who, again, most people who were doing those in mock draft season and NFL draft for Jacksonville Jaguars wanted him on the team. So you can't don't down the pick now because he ain't here. Like, it is what it is. And wrapping that bad boy up for the top half of the league with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Anton Winfield Jr. and Kristen Eisen for the Bucs. So that's the Green Bay Packers, Minnesota Vikings, Tyrann Mathieu, the New Orleans Saints, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as your top half of the league. So I wanted to, again, just kind of point out that with a lot of these teams, what you're seeing is guys who have shown on tape they are consistent. They are like, they're dependable. The product that you're getting. It's not to say other guys can't be good. It's not to say if you would have asked me the question before the 2024 season, how good these guys would have been, I would have had them in the same category. No, this is before the season, before they put on pads. What we have to go on is 2024 tape and 2024 scheme. So that's good news for Jacksonville Jaguars fans, but also that's unfortunate for where the Jaguars are right now. And us trying to predict where we think they're going to land. So you haven't seen them yet, and that's probably why.
Wow. Yeah. No. I mean, so you're in the upper half of the unit tier here. Here's what I think is interesting as you update these next group of tiers with the Packers. That's kind of a group that I think is sneaky good. This is one of those things where they're eclipsed by the fact that they have two of the top groups in the division with them. I think that's a problem for them. But, you mentioned the Saints, Tyrann Mathieu. You mentioned Harrison Smith, who's a dude that I've been following since the early editions of the Student of the Game podcast, back when that was still a thing. That guy's awesome in general. And I think we have another theme where we have dudes, especially in Antoine Winfield Jr., that are benefiting from a solid front in front of them. So next group down, we're talking, I think you talk, league average. That's right. I like that name for this group.
League average. And I know folks in Philadelphia, especially, a lot of my friends I got in Philly are going to be pissed off with me saying that their secondary or their safety core is league average with, Reed, Blankenship, Andrew McCouber they added in the draft, and Sidney Brown. But I'm sorry, it is what it is. Like, you got a dominant defensive front. Your cornerbacks are good, but at the end of the day, I do believe that is probably just average as average can be. Secondary who gets by because they have that good front. Chicago Bears, Kevin Byard and Jaquan Brisker, Dallas Cowboys. I think at this point, those are probably your better. I can't say they're the best, but those are probably your better guys in this tier. Dallas Cowboys, Donovan Wilson and Malik Hooker. New England Patriots with Jabril Peppers and Kyle Duggar. Cleveland Browns with Ronnie Hickman, Grant Delpit, and Rayshawn Jenkins.
Grant Delpit is still in the league. That's awesome.
Yeah, I recognize that Rayshawn Jenkins name, as their backup option, or maybe even the guy who can compete there for the Cleveland Browns. But again, these are guys that we've seen do it, and they have another guy lining up out opposite of them who may have a question mark here or there.
We've seen one of those guys help the Jags for a time be one of the top players in turnovers a number of years back, I dare say. Yeah. By number, I mean two.
And then get cut. Then just don't know what to think about that.
You might as well be coaching the NBA at that rate. I mean, damn. Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, but then when we wrap that bad boy up with the Carolina Panthers, and that's where I knew I was going to lose some folks, just because folks are going to say, hey, man, it's the Panthers. No, but the Panthers defense the secondary is not bad. It's just the fact that their offense was just so horrendous. Yeah. I thought Trevon Moehrig is a really good dang safety out of Las Vegas last year, out of the Raiders. They added Lathan Ransom in the draft, and they have Damani Richardson. Like, I think that's a very solid safety group, at least league average. So that's kind of where I landed with the Philadelphia Eagles, Chicago Bears, Dallas Cowboys, New England Patriots, Cleveland Browns, and Carolina Panthers, all at basically my bunch of groups that's like right in the middle of the league, just that little clump of league average guys. They could be better, they could be worse, but for the most part, you know what you're getting there based on the work that they previously previously put out there. So any thoughts, any wild takes you think I'm being a little crazy with, or a little too high, a little too low on somebody?
Yeah, as you update these tiers, the commonality I see for that group, for the league average group, is these are guys that have some sort of alleged quarterback threat. And by alleged, I mean whether you're Drake May or Dakota Rain Prescott. You're a guy that has put his defense in harm's way just as often as not. And this defense has had to respond to that. The fact that the Browns have a secondary in here too. I mean, Delpit's a guy that was, I covered when he was at LSU battling UCF in the Fiesta Bowl with the Black and Gold Banneret. Oh, actually, that would have been a different outlet then, but nonetheless, with Grant Delpit still being in the league, I could see he's one of these older guys that's versatile and can be everywhere just the way you want a safety to be. But these are teams that are either like struggling at the quarterback spot or mid-tier or higher. What's interesting, and you mentioned it with the Eagles, is their defense being basically the defensive front. If you're not sure, you have to bet against them. When have they been tested? Really? So I like what you did putting the defending Super Bowl champions there. But what I notice is there's a certain cat that isn't in this tier quite yet. I wonder if the Duuuval is getting a little bit of suspense. What's the next tier, Travis?
Well, the next tier we have is below average. I mean, and that's when we start getting to that conversation of maybe the Jacksonville Jaguars can make an appearance, maybe not. Because again, I'm going to leave Jaguars as the last team we discuss. So again, you know what we're comparing them to. So it's possible that we can be in this average to below average range. We'll see where we land. But I'm starting with the Indianapolis Colts with Cam Bynum and Nick Cross. I think that was a solid group, but not necessarily good group, if that makes sense. Like, I think, Cam has that potential to be a really good safety. Like, he's shown it already in Minnesota. But again, without that Minnesota front, without that, that Brian Flores blitzing situation, you don't know what it's going to look like. And Nick Cross, his arrow was at least pointing up in the 2024 season. So we'll see what that looks like. The Buffalo Bills with DeMar Hamlin, back from the dead. No joke. I legitimately mean,
yes.
Yeah,
the actual comeback player of the year. Yes, understood.
But yes, and he's solid, but he's not world shattering talent as far as that concerned. He's more like in that level of Dewey Winger for the Jacksonville Jaguars, who's going to be in the right spot at the right time and kind of just build it up in that way. Got Washington Commanders with Quan Martin and Will Harris. Again, they're solid guys, but for the most part, just guys you can absolutely upgrade in the middle rounds of the draft overall. Tennessee Titans with Amani Hooker and Xavier Woods, but they also added Kevin Winston Jr., and that's what, for me personally, made me want to put them in that below average range and move them up from the bottom of the league, because I think Xavier Woods and Amani Hooker alone aren't getting the job done. They're just not. But Kevin Winston Jr. at least has that a little bit of that potential, just based on how you project him coming from college. Anyone who kind of watched him in college. And wrapping the below average category up with this, I have the New York Giants with Javon Holland from Miami and Tyler Nubin. Like, Holland had a rough season coming off of this, his 2024 year with the Miami Dolphins, but they also had no pass rush up front. And you kind of have to wonder if that kind of has something to do with this. Like, you want to give him a small pass, but at the same time, we'll see kind of where that lands overall.
And that's kind of the thing we see with this group, for sure. Is they either, they're either that group that doesn't have a defensive front, or in the case of the Colts and the Titans, they had a quarterback that left them in the dust and left them in a bad field position. And so when that happens, you're asked to do an awful lot. And then, like I said, in general, I agree a lot with what you're doing with the tiers, and not just because you're the DB expert. I think I'm noticing kind of a trend with each part of the group being a consistency and where it falls the way that it does. The Packers is about the only thing that I would question, only because I don't know enough about the Packers defense. And again, it's mostly because they were hidden by the rest of the division, like I mentioned earlier. And the Bears is another group, with no disrespect to Caleb, but at day's end, he's a rookie quarterback that was struggling. We don't need to bring up Will Levis being a quarterback that was struggling even more, but I mean, we're going to anyway. And of course, we don't need to talk about the Giants and their situation, where they found guys that were better than the guy that they paid, that got rid of the guy that was Saquon Barkley. Anyways, anyways. So, and I know where you're going with the bottom of the tier. I'll let you read it first.
No, so I mean, I want to wrap this bad boy up before we really get into the conversation of the Jaguars. I bottom 7 teams in the league, or bottom 6, not including the Jaguars. I have the San Francisco 49ers, the Miami Dolphins, the New York Jets and I got to talk about that with Andre Cisco. Tony Adams, and Malachi Moore. I'm okay with Malachi Moore. I thought he was a solid prospect, not world shattering, not top safety prospect in the draft, but a solid safety prospect that maybe developmental option to kind of move with. But Tony Adams, you're not writing home about Andre Cisco with Jacksonville. You guys already know who he is and about his game. Like, he could end up being a top safety in the league, or he could be a practice squad guy next season. And you frankly just don't know, because it's really going to depend on how he improves under a new coaching staff, and finally, I should say, not under Ryan Nielsen. Now we know Ryan Nielsen's that coaching staff wasn't good. I mean, let's just be objective about this. They didn't communicate well. The players didn't seem to hear the lessons and the coaching that was being given to them from that staff. So obviously they needed to go, and a lot of those guys regressed, including Andre Cisco in that defense. But just looking at the guys before they played a game, before we've seen anything in pads, that Andre Cisco, Tony Adams, Malachi Moore safety group is absolutely, without question, bottom of the league. Like, that is, the Jaguars may not have the worst safety situation in the league because the New York Jets exist. Like, I don't think I'm going crazy and saying that. I'm just being real.
You know who else exists? The 49ers safety core. That group has been just carried by Fred Warner and company up front, and mostly because Fred Warner can cover as good as any of the damn safeties. Let's call that what it is too. While we're at it, I got to call that out too as part of it. I find it fascinating. You mentioned Andre Cisco in the bottom part of the league at this point, where the Jets are buying in. But again, when you have a quarterback situation like that, okay, sure. I would say the same for the Dolphins. And I believe one of Jimmy Stone's, aka James Gladstone, the GM for your Jacksonville Jaguars, his quote is "F dem picks." With the Bengals, it's F that defense. You see, they're still shipping guys off the roster,
So yeah, the Bengals, and just to wrap that thing up, because I didn't mention the Bengals defense is also in this bottom group of Geno Stone and Jordan Battle. Again, you can upgrade both of those guys. This just kind of is what it is. You got the Raiders with Isaiah Pola Mao and Jeremy Chin, which Jeremy Chin is actually a really good versatile piece. But again, across from him, you got Isaiah Pola, who you can absolutely upgrade on, and Jeremy Chin being your top guy is just not what he's there for. Like, he's supposed to be a Swiss Army knife that you can use to move all over the field and everything else, but man, you got to upgrade that somehow. Like, that may be one of those positions that they just don't value, and that's okay also. But at the end of the day, this is kind of what we're looking at when we're comparing your Jacksonville Jaguars to these other teams. So we've talked about 31 NFL teams. We got the San Francisco 49ers, the Miami Dolphins, the New York Jets, the Cincinnati Bengals, the Raiders, and the Kansas City Chiefs, all in the league worst category for the safety position. And then we still have to answer the question of where the Jacksonville Jaguars lie.
I absolutely love that you're defending AFC champion Kansas City Chiefs have a league bottom tier safety core. And I think you're right, by the way. Chris Jones, the actual MVP of the Kansas City Chiefs. Hashtag I said it.
Nah, man, that front and that scheme, they're doing well. Those guys just aren't going to get beat deep and exposed in that way. And when you got a secondary full of guys who are just not going to be out of position and not going to get beat deep, that doesn't mean that they're good. It just means that they're fighting to play another down. And that's enough in today's NFL. Often, again, we're talking about the Kansas City Chiefs and we're talking about the Philadelphia Eagles, both being teams that I would say are at least league average or worse as far as their safety, that safety unit. And I think it's still fine as long as you have a dominant front. That's where it all starts and ends. And I mean, even the Minnesota Vikings, it was the same way with their blitzing front and their aggressive front. It's the same situation. So the Jacksonville Jaguars, we have Darnell Savage, Eric Murray, and Caleb Ransall. Caleb Ransall drafted from Tulane. If you were to believe the NFL draft nicks, I know Todd McShay, before the draft even occurred, was discussing Caleb Ransall and basically compared him to Jalen Petrie. That was his comp for the nickelback slash spear position, whatever you want to call it, in Caleb Ramsaw. And yeah, that was his comparison for Caleb Ramsaw. Now, why is that important? Because, well, Jalen Petrie is who played with Eric Murray in Tennessee for the Tennessee Titans in 2024. Like, that's what they did. They paired those guys up and allowed multiple 3 safety sets. That's what they would do very frequently for the Houston Texans in 2024. So is there a possibility that Anthony Campanelli has an idea in his head that he wants to use Eric Murray in the same way that the Houston Texans also used him in 2024 and maybe run a little bit more of those 3 tight end sets with Darnell Savage, Eric Murray, and Caleb Ramsaw on the field very often? Maybe Caleb Ramsaw manning that slot corner note role, or maybe playing that robber role ever so often, and on other downs roaming the middle of the field because he runs a 4.340. Maybe that might be what's going on. Maybe that's a possibility. Or maybe they just want to play those guys and just see who's the best on the field. Like, that's equally possible. I'm not going to act like I'm in their huddles and in their meetings, but my overall point is, when you're looking at these 3 guys, Darnell Savage, Eric Murray, Caleb Ramsaw, and you're man-to-man comparing them to the other guys we just talked about, the Las Vegas Raiders, do we think that they're better than that team? I think I would reasonably say yes, and I don't think I'm going over the top and saying that. But do I think that they're better than the New York Jets? We talked about that. Yeah, I think absolutely. But do I think they're better than these teams that we mentioned in that below average category? The Buffalo Bills, the Indianapolis Colts, the Tennessee Titans. I think we might be in shooting range, but that's a conversation worth having. Like, all of a sudden, we're in that below average to league worst range before putting on pads, before seeing any games played or anything along those lines, just based on what we've seen on film. With the guys in previous seasons or in previous schemes or in college or whatever you want to call it. So that is where I'm currently landing, that the Jacksonville Jaguars, before ever playing a game and earning it on the field, earning a reputation of being better than what we think that they are, just man to man, I think the Jacksonville Jaguars are probably landing in that below average category. And I could even see someone arguing that they may be at the top of that league worst category, which is like the bottom 7 in the league for this safety position. But I want to know your thoughts before I circle back to what their ceiling might be.
So before you do that, let's get the tiers back up and have you wrap that beast up, because there's a couple interesting things that I'm going to observe here there too. You have them in the below average tier. My question is, are you prepared to say that that's a worse secondary core than, let's say, the Pats or the Bears? I don't know that I'm there. But there's a case.
I personally believe they are right now. Not a secondary, but a worse safety core than the Bears and the Patriots. Now, if you're asking what their ceiling is, that's a different conversation. But if we're just talking about those guys versus Jabril Peppers, who we've seen be a good safety, Kyle Duggar, who we've seen be a good safety, Jaquan Brisker and Kevin Byard were just good safeties in 2023. Like, that wasn't that long ago. Like, again, we've more recently seen that. I can't say that I've seen Eric Murray be a top, 25 safety in the league. I haven't seen that. I can't say that I've seen Darnell Savage be a top 25, 30 safety in the league. I cannot say I've ever seen that. So,
of course, you haven't seen it. They were too busy getting subbed out by
But so my point is, if I haven't seen it, I can't then be like, oh well, yeah, they're a top unit in the league because Jaguars. Like, no, they gotta prove it on the field, and Caleb hasn't had the opportunity to prove it just yet.
Yeah, so Ransell's not on there yet, right? I get that.
Goes back to my original point. I'm going to give the edge to guys I've seen do it, and maybe I think they can get back to doing it, if that makes sense. So Jaguars have they've leaned into this whole I'm going to be young and my roster is going to be young philosophy. And with that comes the possibility that you might go into a season not knowing whether or not you're going to have a bottom 7 safety group, or if they're going to be a top 5 safety group, because you don't know where they're going to land. But the good news for the Duval about, and hallelujah, I got the good news for you, is that the LA Rams exist. We have proof of concept, baby. Like, we know what this could be because we've seen it happen. We already talked about the fact that Cam Kitchens and Cam Curl for the LA Rams, they're a top 10 safety group. But do you know how they got Cam Curl? He was a free agent signing for 2 years, $9 million. You know how they got in 2024 season? That's just a year ago. You know how they got Cam Kitchens? He was a third round draft pick in the 2024 NFL draft. So they just flipped over their entire safety room in one offseason by bringing in a low cost free agent, again, $9 million over 2 years, and a third round draft pick in the same draft class. And they flipped over their entire secondary with those two moves. Well, what did the Jaguars do this offseason? They brought in Eric Murray, a stabilizing force who can communicate back on the back end to make sure they don't have all those busted coverages like they had earlier in the season with the 2024 Jacksonville Jaguars. Okay, and he also doesn't miss tackles. Oh, that's interesting. And they brought in Caleb Bransall, who was drafted in the 3rd round of the same draft class. Maybe that's what's going on. They're just trying to do the exact same thing. And maybe if it works out, that's the Jacksonville Jaguars ceiling. We're talking the top 7 to top 10 secondary group or safety group. That there's your proof of concept, if anything. Like, that's what we're talking about at this point, Duval. So we don't know where it's going to land, but at the end of the day, they're going to go with these young rookies and see where it lands. But that's the positive I can take from this. Maybe they're going to be bad, and you might be right in thinking that, but maybe they're going to be good. We're going to have to wait and see if they get some pads on, baby.
So the lesson today is the LA Rams exist. That's no, I think there's some fine takes there too. And listen, you've always been a later adopter than I of certain elements of positivity because this team has made you drink. You have the t-shirt. Hopefully you don't have to break it out as much this season as much as you did the past 2. But nonetheless, another thing to save you, Duval, out from your lament, the other places on the defense where they've beefed up quite nicely, either just by coaching with addition by subtraction or adding in one Travis Hunter and one Caleb Bransall. And we haven't even talked about Raywan Hall yet. Lieutenant Raywan Hall, I might add. Thank you for your service, sir.
Yes.
So with all that being said there, you have convinced me. And Brian on Facebook, there's your answer. He thinks your safety core is a bottom tier with hope trending upward. I think that's a fair way to say it. So
I think that's fair. Yes.
So with all that being said, and after getting this relatively grim news, Travis Holmes, tell the world.
Relatively grim. Jeez. Well, hopefully it wasn't too grim for you because, again, I think being below average was as honest as I could be without being like pessimistic and saying that they were bottom 7, but also saying that they have that potential to be a top 10 unit, but give you the hope that, hey, we'll see what it's going to be, and it shouldn't put you in a different spot than you already were going into this offseason. That's just that's a wide range. That is Bitcoin. You are just investing and seeing where it's going to land. So that is where we are with this secondary group. We'll see when they get passed on, and we'll just react to what happens instead of freaking out beforehand. So Travis D. Holmes on all the socials. Travis D. Holmes, BigCatCountry.com. Keep it locked in, and we will have you guys covered for all the off-season Jacksonville Jaguars coverage, and obviously in season. So, yeah, we got you. But where can you be found, sir?
Of course, I'm Kyle Nash, the student of the game. You can find me on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Twitter at the SOTG. Find me on Facebook as a student of the game. Check out my writings with the Fans First Sports Network covering your Jacksonville Jaguars, as well as the Orlando Magic. The NBA draft is coming. I'm telling you, I will have something to say about that. Then, of course, my work with the Black and Gold Banneret Night Shift podcast, covering all things UCF, football, and basketball, and more there for all of the above there, too. So I was a proud parent watching my dude be a child opening the gift of DB talk here on the Duval Dive. my personal champion, Travis D. Holmes. Thank you to you, sir. Thank you out there, you Duval divers, listening to what we do. And thank you to the Believe Network for doing what it is you do, support us. But until next time, everyone, class. By the way, like and subscribe to the Duval Dive YouTube channel, please. Class.
Let's go.
Dismiss.